There are certain moments in Hollywood that stop the world cold. Not a box office record or a red carpet spectacle, but something far more quiet and far more powerful. This is one of those moments. A name printed on a graduation program. A single, deliberate decision made by a young woman who had every reason to stay silent and chose instead to speak volumes without saying a single word aloud. The story of Suri, the daughter of the most bankable movie star on the planet, is not the story most people expected. It is not about rebellion for its own sake, or a dramatic public feud playing out in the tabloids. It is something much more layered, and in many ways, more compelling than anything her father has ever put on screen. To understand why the world reacted the way it did, you need to understand who this young woman is, where she came from, and what it truly meant for her to make the choice she made. When Suri was born in April 2006, the media attention surrounding her was unlike anything that had existed before in modern celebrity culture. Her parents, Tom Cruise and Katie Holmes, were at the absolute peak of their public visibility. Tom Cruise was the defining movie star of his generation, a man who had spent 2 decades becoming synonymous with ambition, charisma, and sheer box office dominance. Katie Holmes had risen from a beloved television series to genuine Hollywood leading lady status, and together they had become one of the most photographed couples on earth. Their daughter's birth was treated less like a private family event and more like a cultural phenomenon. For the first several months of her life, she was kept away from cameras, and the anticipation built to a kind of fever pitch that is almost impossible to describe in today's context. When she finally appeared publicly, the reaction was extraordinary. A newborn child became, overnight, a global figure simply by existing. The weight of that kind of attention, placed on a person who cannot yet speak or walk or understand what a camera is, set the tone for everything that would follow. Growing up in that environment was unlike anything most people can relate to. The family moved between cities, lived inside layers of security and privacy protocols, and operated within a world where almost nothing was ordinary. Suri did not have a conventional childhood in the way that most people understand the term. She had access to extraordinary resources and experiences, but she also had almost no control over the public narrative that surrounded her life, from her first breath. Beyond the glare of public attention, the private world Suri was born into had its own complex internal structure. Tom Cruise's deep involvement in the Church of Scientology was not a casual affiliation. It was a central organizing principle of his life, and by extension, a defining feature of the household she was born into. The philosophy and practices of that organization shaped daily life in ways that went far beyond the spiritual. Decisions about education, about social relationships, about how the family interacted with the outside world, were all filtered through the lens of that belief system. For Katie Holmes, this created a growing tension that would eventually reach a breaking point. As a mother watching her daughter grow older and begin to encounter the more demanding aspects of life inside that world, she started to realize that the future she wanted for her child and the future that seemed to be taking shape around her were moving in very different directions. The concern was not abstract. It was specific, practical, and deeply personal. She began to understand that if she wanted to give her daughter a different kind of life, she would have to act decisively, and she would have to do it in a way that left no room for reversal. What followed was one of the most carefully planned and swiftly executed personal decisions in the history of celebrity culture. Katie Holmes did not simply file for divorce. She engineered an exit strategy with the precision and secrecy of someone who understood exactly what was at stake. She used devices that could not be traced back to her regular communication channels. She secured legal counsel quietly, working closely with her father, a practicing attorney with considerable experience. She identified the legal jurisdiction that would give her the strongest position to protect her daughter's future. She rented a place to live before anyone around her had any indication that a change was coming. And then she moved. The divorce settlement was reached in a time frame that left legal observers genuinely surprised. For two people with the kind of wealth and public profile that Tom Cruise and Katie Holmes possessed, a resolution in under 2 weeks was remarkable. But it was not accidental. It was the product of exhaustive preparation and a clear-eyed understanding of what mattered most. The terms of the agreement reflected Katie Holmes' priorities with precision. Suri would be raised in New York, away from the institutional structures and social environments that had defined her earliest years. The legal framework included specific provisions designed to ensure that Suri would grow up insulated from certain religious influences. There were financial obligations that Tom Cruise fulfilled consistently, covering child support, educational costs, and healthcare. But the physical presence, the actual daily involvement of a father in his daughter's life, was another matter entirely. From the moment the divorce was finalized, Tom Cruise and Suri's lives diverged completely. He remained one of the most visible and commercially successful actors in the world. She grew up in Manhattan, riding the subway with her mother, attending a school in Chelsea that valued global awareness and treated her as a student rather than a symbol, and building a life that was grounded and real in ways her early childhood had never been. The last time anyone documented the two of them together in any public setting was more than a decade before she graduated high school. The years in between were filled with his film releases, his promotional appearances, his continued prominence in every corner of global entertainment. And through all of it, she was somewhere in New York, living a life he was not part of. There is something genuinely strange about growing up as the child of someone who is simultaneously everywhere and nowhere. Tom Cruise's face was on billboards throughout the city where his daughter was growing up. His movies played in every theater. His name appeared in every entertainment conversation. He was inescapable as a cultural presence and completely absent as a paternal one. For Suri, navigating adolescence meant carrying that contradiction quietly, without the ability to escape the constant reminder of who her father was to the rest of the world, while knowing from personal experience what his absence meant to her. Katie Holmes responded to this by doing something that is harder and more important than it sounds. She showed up every single day, for every school event, every ordinary afternoon, every challenge and milestone and unremarkable Tuesday. She was there. She built a community around her daughter that was small, trustworthy, and fiercely protective of Suri's right to just be a teenager. She took her on the subway. She let her make friends who valued her as a person rather than as a connection to fame. She allowed her to develop genuine interests in art and performance, without pushing her toward the spotlight or away from it. The result was a young woman who knew herself, who had a sense of her own values, her own aesthetic, her own direction. By the time she reached her final years of high school, she was not the miniature celebrity the tabloids had tried to make her in early childhood. She was something more interesting and more durable than that. She was a person with a plan. In June 2024, at a graduation ceremony in New York City, a commencement program listed a name that immediately caught the attention of anyone paying close attention. Not Suri Cruise, not the famous surname that carried with it decades of box office records and global recognition and the kind of brand equity that most people in entertainment would give almost anything to inherit. The name on the program was Suri Noelle. Noelle is the middle name of Katie Holmes. The choice was not impulsive. It was not a dramatic gesture made for the cameras or for the headlines. It was a deeply considered statement about identity and loyalty and belonging. By choosing her mother's middle name as her own public surname, she was saying something clear and specific about who she considers her family. She was honoring the parent who actually raised her. She was creating distance, deliberate and permanent, from a legacy that she had not chosen and that had shaped her life without her consent. The reaction from the public and the media was immediate. People understood what it meant. This was not a teenager acting out. This was a legal adult making a considered, articulate choice about who she was and how she wanted to move through the world. Dropping one of the most recognizable surnames in Hollywood to take her mother's middle name is the opposite of a bid for attention. It is a rejection of a particular kind of attention in favor of something more genuine. Adding another layer to the moment was the fact that on the day his daughter graduated and quietly retired his name from her public identity, Tom Cruise was photographed at a concert in London, thousands of miles away, visibly enjoying himself. The visual contrast was stark and did not go unnoticed. A few months after graduation, Suri was spotted moving into student housing at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. She enrolled in the School of Design, one of the most rigorous and competitive design programs in the country. It was not an obvious choice for someone with her background. She could have gone to a university in Los Angeles or New York. stayed close to the fashion and entertainment industries that already knew her name, leveraged every connection available to her. Instead, she chose a school known for demanding work, located in a city with no particular celebrity culture, in a program where the quality of her ideas and her commitment to craft would matter far more than anything about her family history. Carnegie Mellon does not hand anyone anything. Students there earn what they get through sustained effort and genuine ability. For someone who had spent her entire life being defined by other people's ideas about who she was and who she should become, that kind of environment represented something valuable. Her interest in design and fashion was not manufactured for a public image. Anyone who had been following her quietly through her teenage years in New York had seen her gravitating toward that world for years. She visited fabric shops. She sketched. She watched and absorbed the visual culture of a city that takes fashion seriously in ways that go beyond trend following. She was building something real, and she wanted the formal training to match the instinct she had already developed. To fully understand Suri's story, you have to hold it alongside the stories of her older siblings, Isabella and Connor, both adopted by Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman during their marriage in the 1990s. When that marriage ended, both children chose to remain with their father and to stay deeply involved with the Church of Scientology. They are adults now, living lives that reflect the values and community they grew up within. Connor has been seen regularly at church events alongside his father. Isabella lives in London. Their relationship with Tom Cruise appears to be active and ongoing. There is no equivalent relationship with Suri. The publicly available record shows no shared space, no co-attendance at any event, no visible contact of any kind in over a decade. The most likely explanation for this silence lies in a specific doctrinal policy that requires members to cut contact with individuals who have left the church or been designated as outside it. Since Katie Holmes left the organization and raised Suri entirely outside of it, the two of them would occupy exactly that position from the perspective of those who remained inside. What this creates is an unusual family portrait. Tom Cruise is a present, engaged father figure to his adult children who share his faith and his world. He is simultaneously a complete absence in the life of the only child he has by blood. The contrast between how he relates to Isabella and Connor and how he has related, or not related, to Suri over the past 12 years is one of the more striking and unexplained aspects of his public persona. He has spoken publicly about his commitment to his children. He has been photographed proudly with Connor at sporting events and has expressed his support for Isabella's creative work. He denied abandoning Suri when the subject arose publicly years ago, citing professional obligations. But professional obligations do not explain a decade of no documented contact. Something else does, and the most coherent explanation involves the policies of the organization that remain central to his life. There is a tendency, when discussing the children of famous people, to frame their choices as reactions to their parents, as responses to fame, or to absence, or to pressure. And while it would be dishonest to pretend those factors play no role, it is also incomplete. Suri is not simply reacting. She is building. The choice to use Noelle instead of Cruise is not primarily a rejection of her father. It is primarily an embrace of her mother, of the life they built together, of the values and the community and the everyday reality that shaped who she actually is. It honors 12 years of school pickups and subway rides and ordinary life in a city that gave her the gift of being unknown enough to become herself. The decision to attend Carnegie Mellon, to study design seriously, to move to Pittsburgh and sit in a competitive studio environment where her last name gives her nothing, is not about proving something to anyone else. It is about becoming who she has apparently always wanted to be. She is not a Nepo baby leveraging family connections. She is not a celebrity child chasing the spotlight. She is not a cautionary tale about the damage famous parents can do, though that element of the story is present. She is a young woman who grew up in genuinely unusual circumstances, who had a mother determined to give her a real life anyway, and who has arrived at adulthood with clarity about what she wants and the willingness to work for it in rooms where no one will give it to her simply because of who her father is. Looking at the full arc of this story, it is impossible not to recognize what Katie Holmes accomplished. She made one of the most consequential decisions of her life under enormous pressure, in a situation where the risks of getting it wrong were substantial and personal. She built a framework around her daughter that held. She created a childhood that produced a person with genuine self-knowledge and genuine direction. Tom Cruise, for all his extraordinary professional achievements, is left with a different legacy in this particular chapter of his life. He remains one of the most successful and recognizable film stars the world has ever seen. He continues to perform at a level that defies his age and the conventional expectations of his industry. But the story of his relationship with his youngest child is a quiet, significant gap in an otherwise meticulously managed public image. The silence speaks in ways that no blockbuster can drown out. Suri, now known publicly as Suri Noelle, is in Pittsburgh working. She is studying design at one of the most demanding schools in the country. She is doing the unglamorous, necessary, deeply worthwhile work of becoming genuinely good at something she cares about. She is doing it without the Cruise name and without the shortcuts it would have offered. That is the headline. Not a scandal, not a war, not a breakdown or a rebellion or a desperate bid for attention. A young woman, raised with extraordinary care by a mother who fought for her, arriving at adulthood with her eyes open and her hands already building the next thing. Everyone is shocked. They probably should not be. Anyone who was paying attention could see this coming. The only surprise is how quietly, how confidently, and how completely she has done it.